Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Paris Schutz. Brandis Friedman is on assignment. On the show tonight, Alderman Ed Burke loses big in his attempt to throw out key evidence in his federal criminal trial. We tell you what that means. As lake levels fluctuate and erosion worsens, Chicago beaches are bearing the effects. What's being done to protect the lakefront? Fifth Third Bank is in hot water with federal regulators. That and more business news from Cranes.
These aren't mainstream histories, and maybe someday they will be.
And a podcast series explores the LGBTQ archives of the Gerber Hart Library. But first, some of today's top stories. Another violent weekend in Chicago. 5 people were killed and 27 were wounded, and a third law enforcement officer was shot. The Chicago police officer was seriously wounded in a shootout yesterday during a traffic stop in Englewood. Here's what Police Superintendent David Brown had to say.
They're just doing their job. Why would a person want to kill him? That's from the families I'm hearing, and just the concern and the pause they have that is this job really worth it? But day after day after day, they show up to work and risk everything for all of our safety. Everything. Selfless service. I mean, it's beyond bravery and courage.
Meanwhile, one of those officers who was shot last week is being released from the hospital. Officer Fernanda Ballesteros was flanked by fellow Chicago police officers saluting as she left University of Chicago Medical Center today. The 3-year CPD veteran was hit by gunfire while trying to pull over a driver in Englewood last week. Before leaving the medical center, here's what Ballesteros had to say to her partner who took her to the hospital.
And most importantly, thank you to Officer Young, my partner who had my back and carried me to safety. I'm forever grateful for his quick thinking and swift response. You were my guardian angel that night.
Good to see her up and doing well. The 2 suspects in Officer Ballesteros' shooting are still at large. The city's taking steps aimed at helping residents deal with violence. Starting today, Chicago will reimburse homeowners, businesses, and most drivers for security devices. The Home and Business Protection Program will provide rebates for outdoor security camera systems, cloud storage for video footage, outdoor motion sensor lighting, vehicle GPS trackers, and subscription costs. Here's what Mayor Lori Lightfoot had to say at today's announcement.
We heard loud and clear from residents that this is something that they wanted, and we're here to make sure that we provide it. And I want to be clear, if you don't have the resources up front, don't worry, we will help you. If you're not able to do the installation yourself, don't worry, we're here to help you.
And officials are calling for more regulations on ammunition sales. Cook County Sheriff Tom Dart and state lawmakers LaShawn Ford and Jacqueline Collins are looking to close what they call a loophole in the state law. They say it allows ammunition sales to people who have had their gun permits revoked. Currently, there are 32,000 people in Cook County who have had their firearm owner identification card taken away, and 20,000 of them have not turned in their gun or card.
Chris Rock once said something about, if you want to stop people from shooting, tax the bullet and make it so high that people can't afford to buy it. Well, we're not even doing that. We're not even adding a tax to the bullet. We're just saying that if you're legally able to buy a gun, you're legally able to buy ammunition.
And a former Illinois lawmaker has died. Former Republican Congressman John Edward Porter died Friday after a recent hospitalization. Porter represented Illinois' 10th district for 20 years until 2000. Before that, he served in the Illinois General Assembly from 1973 to 1979. In Congress, he was an advocate for biomedical research, and to honor him in 2014, the National Institutes of Health renamed the Neuroscience Research Center after him. Porter was 87 years old. And up next, the latest on Alderman Ed Burke's corruption case, so please stay with us.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
A federal judge and attorneys have been sorting through motions now for 2 years in the federal corruption case of Alderman Ed Burke. But today, a judge gave a definitive answer on attempts to throw out key evidence and hinted at a potential trial date. WTTW News reporter Heather Sharon joins us now with more. Heather, these motions have been going on seemingly forever, but today it seems to pretty much come to an end as Judge Dow issues a ruling on this. Tell us what the ruling is and what the Burke legal team had been asking for.
Well, this 194-page ruling really runs the gamut over all of the evidence in this very complicated case. The ruling spent a significant amount of time examining a 2016 Supreme Court decision that narrowed what constitutes a corrupt act by a politician. Now, Alderman Burke and his lawyers argued that the conduct that he is charged with did not meet that standard. Judge Dow disagreed and said that Alderman Burke is going to have to plead his case to a jury.
So we know that this case will go to trial at some point. And we know from court records that investigators intercepted more than 9,000 calls made by Burke or answered by him during this investigation. This is key evidence here for prosecutors. Will it be admissible in the trial?
It will. Now, Alderman Burke tried really hard to get all of these telephone conversations tossed out, saying that the government improperly obtained a court order to record them. Judge Dow said, nope, that court order was good. Now, these recordings also include conversations he had with disgraced former Alderman Danny Solis, perhaps most famous for Burke asking Solis, say, did we land the tuna? Those recordings will also come in and are expected to make up the bulk of the case against Alderman Burke, who I should say has pled not guilty.
As I understand, there's a recording that where Burke says something to the effect of, I'm too old for them to come after me, or something like that. A lot of interesting things in these recordings. So the judges said the trial's probably not going to take place till 2023. There's a city council election. If Alderman Burke is to run, can he still run and retain that seat?
He sure can. If you cast your memory all the way back to 2019, he had actually already been charged with attempted extortion in another part of this case when he was reelected to a record-breaking 13th term. If he decides to run for a 14th term to represent parts of the Southwest side, he could do so while also facing a jury in this extortion, bribery, and racketeering case, which would truly be unprecedented in Chicago history.
Truly amazing, and it means the case has lasted an entire term here, entire elected term here, City Council thus far. All right, more to come. Heather, thanks very much.
Thanks, Paris.
And you can read Heather's full story on our website, where you can also find a link to read the judge's full ruling and much more. It's all at WTTW.com/news. Chicago beaches are bearing the brunt of fluctuating lake levels and worsening erosion. This as Lake Michigan levels plummet following 2 years of reaching record highs. The Chicago Tribune did a deep dive into this issue this weekend as officials and experts are working to stay proactive to protect Chicago's lakefront. And joining us to discuss these efforts and the factors at play are Casey Sabito, Coastal Resilience Specialist for the Illinois Department of Natural Resources Coastal Management Program and the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign Prairie Research Institute, and Joel Brahmeyer, President and CEO of Alliance for the Great Lakes. Welcome both of you to Chicago tonight. Casey, I want to start with you. A few months ago, the New York Times did a very in-depth investigation and found that climate change posed a serious threat to Chicago because of the rapidly changing lake levels. Give us a synopsis of that threat.
Yeah, the Great Lakes lake levels are cyclical. They go up and down over time. That's completely normal. However, what we've experienced more recently is that the lakes went from record lows to record highs in a really short period of time. So it didn't, many coastal landowners didn't have time to properly prepare for this rise and what it would mean for coastal management, such as the erosion associated with record high lake levels.
And Joel Brahmeyer, last time you were on the show, lake levels were at record highs. In 2013, they were at a record low. This was a 6-foot change. Where are they right now, and what condition have those record highs left Chicago's beaches and lakefront in?
So the water level has dropped off quite a bit from 2020, but it's still above the average, the long-term average. But anybody who has lived in Chicago for a little while will see that the water level looks like it's way down. What that's uncovered is a lot of damage to the shoreline that occurred during those record highs. And remember, a lot of Chicago's shoreline is artificial. The beaches are built up over the last century, and so a lot of that sand got scoured away, and you're left with rocks and walls and other kind of detritus that's sitting out there in the water. And people notice this because they don't see the beaches they're used to seeing.
Casey Sabito, is the problem worse in some spots of the lakefront than others?
Yeah, for sure. I think that Chicago is really interesting in its variety of beaches. We have different sizes, shapes, orientation, and surrounding infrastructure, and all of that played an impact or had an impact on how each beach responded to the lake level conditions and storm events over the past few years. So while some may have seemed to rotate, others retreated uniformly, and while others were completely inundated and lost underneath the high lake levels.
And Joel Brandmeier, as I understand, it's not just the fluctuating lake levels that cause erosion or shoreline damage, but severe storms. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so beaches and other kind of shoreline structures act as a buffer to these extreme storms. So, when you see the waves piling up in November, you see that kind of erosion in action. And those extreme storms can have a real impact on coastal land. And especially if you're in for example, a small beach in Rogers Park, they got hit really hard. Or if you're in South Shore, you saw like a ton of flooding of coastal properties, actually apartment buildings losing their power. And, again, those extreme storms piling up water along the shoreline. And in the record highs of 2020, those structures just couldn't withstand that kind of force. And so you are seeing some impacts, not just to beaches and park loss, but also to the protection of property and people's health that these extreme highs had. And now the question is, well, the lake has gone down a bit, so what are we going to do with the time we have to prepare for in creating a more resilient shoreline?
Yeah, and the flooding of people's basements, it's certainly been a problem on the South Shore and the south side of the lakefront. Casey Sabito, what kinds of solutions are needed? We've got revetments in some portions, you've got beaches, as you mentioned, you've got rocks. What is the scope of the solution that's needed, assuming that these levels are going to fluctuate year after year?
Yeah, I think that we need to take this time to really understand the landscape and to identify priority areas for protection, like what areas were more and less impacted during this past transition from low to high lake levels. How can we prioritize areas for protection, not only when it comes to infrastructure protection, but also habitat, flooding, economic uses, recreational uses. So I think that that's something that's being done right now is just trying to get a handle on the coastal landscape and understand exactly what just happened so that we can best plan to build our infrastructure and create these long-term planning processes that will create a more resilient shoreline as water levels continue to fluctuate and potentially to these record levels more often in the future.
And I know that there is federal funding for the Army Corps of Engineers to do the first comprehensive study on this in 25 years. It's supposed to come out sometime in the next 3 years. Joel Brandmeier, what is it anticipated to show?
Yeah, so back in the 80s when there was a record high, the Corps studied the Chicago shoreline, and the result was a lot of those stepstone revetments, those concrete structures you see along Chicago's parks. They're refreshing that study to see what can happen next. There's also a larger study that's Great Lakes wide, the Great Lakes Coastal Resiliency Study, looking at how do we build resilience, the ability of the shoreline to kind of rebound and take care of itself across large areas. These are really important studies because they can be the first step in unlocking the major investment that is needed to protect the Great Lakes shoreline. We've done a lot of cleanup of polluted sites. We've prevented invasive species. We honestly haven't invested nearly as much as is needed to restore and protect the shoreline for Great Lakes communities. And I think these core studies can be kind of the first steps toward that. It's really important that they get supported and they get done. So we have a roadmap to where we need to invest the next dollar in creating healthy Great Lakes shorelines.
Casey Sabito, is it fair to anticipate rapidly fluctuating lake levels over the next several years and decades? We mentioned it was at a high last year, 2 years ago. It's come down a little bit. Is it all just about the kind of snow that happens up north and the melt off?
Yeah, there are a variety of factors that influence lake levels. It includes precipitation, evaporation, runoff, surface water temperature, and all of these factors are influenced by climate change. So I think if we continue to experience climate change in the way that we have, we can expect that we would see more of these fluctuations and likely see more of these more extreme fluctuations, like seeing the higher highs and the lower lows. It's hard, of course, we don't know exactly what will happen because this is, something that we're all experiencing together as it unfolds. But I think that we are trying to learn so that we can be as proactive as possible as we anticipate these conditions to continue unfolding.
Well, we will continue covering this, and our thanks to Casey Sabito and Joel Braumeyer. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Bruce.
Thank you so much.
And up next, some of today's top business headlines, so please stay with us.
Certainly we can celebrate, but we also have to recognize what so many people have gone through because of racism and what people continue to go through.
I think that Americans are finally beginning to embrace that we are African, we are indigenous, we are European, we are Asian, we are everything.
A legal brawl between Fifth Third Bank and federal regulators is underway. Walmart is hiring big time, and a new study says Cook County has earned itself a new title, Climate Change Refuge. Here to explain all that and more is Crane Chicago business reporter Danny Ecker. Danny, good to see you. So that first story, the U.S. Consumer Protection Financial Bureau is investigating Fifth Third Bank for what it says is a series of unauthorized accounts the bank opened up. Can you fill us in on this?
Right, so this dates back to 2020. The federal regulator group sued Fifth Third at the time, and they said a lot of the bank's accounts from 2010 to 2016 were, or employers rather, were creating fictitious accounts, taking other fraudulent actions to boost their sales goals, and a lot of it was occurring in Chicago, according to the lawsuit. The bank had previously said, okay, maybe around 2,000 accounts or so unauthorized, but the regulators now are saying that that's vastly understated the problem. There were potentially, multiples, huge multiples of that were creating problems, and they've said that the bank has been getting in the way of their efforts to try to verify it. And as for what it means for the bank, I mean, the Bureau argues this could be similar in scope to the Wells Fargo scandal that was occurring around the same time, and the bank has said they wanted to go before a jury and said it's actually just much more limited than the Bureau is making it out to be.
All right, so a bigger issue than Fifth Third made it out to be. We should mention that Fifth Third is a supporter of WTTW. On to the next story, Walmart says it's opening a giant warehouse out around Joliet. What do we know about this, and what does it mean for the warehouse and trucking industries in general?
Yeah, well, the big news is about jobs. Walmart says it plans to hire about 1,000 workers at this new distribution center in Joliet. It's a 1.1 million square foot warehouse near the Union Pacific Intermodal terminal there. This is more of what we've been seeing throughout the pandemic, especially with Amazon, which has grown with the rise of online shopping. The demand for big warehouse space to store and distribute goods has been off the charts. Walmart's just trying to keep up. And the Chicago area is really a strategic hub for buildings like this. Will County especially is two huge intermodal centers at I-80 and I-55. So this is the kind of thing I think we'll likely continue to see, and it's one of the hottest sectors in commercial real estate.
Yeah, it seems like they are going up everywhere. Lastly, a new study finds that Cook County is a top destination for those fleeing climate change. Explain that for us.
Yeah, haven't you heard that people move to Chicago for the weather, right? That's why everyone moves here. This is a study from a platform called Hire a Helper. It said that Cook County was actually number 7 on the list of the 10 places that climate change migrants are heading. In other words, where people who are moving because of the effects of global warming. So a lot of those people were leaving parts of Texas, it appears. Many were moving to Arizona and California, but Cook County also is very popular. It'll be interesting to see whether that's a trend that continues with climate change, with more people potentially wanting to come to the Chicago area.
And we'll see how long they last here once they go through our winters. All right, Danny Ecker, thank you so much.
All right, thanks, Paris.
And up next, a podcast series exploring queer history with help from a local library. But first, we take a look at the weather. A library filled with collections of people's stories is coming to life in a podcast series. Chicago Tonight's Joanna Hernandez recently went to the Gerber Hart Library and Archives to meet the people who are unboxing LGBTQ history. Here's another look.
Mark your calendars and make plans to go to Mauston, Wisconsin over Memorial Day weekend. We'll visit CK's Outback, a women-only campground about a half-hour north of Wisconsin Dells.
At the Gerber Hart Library and Archives, you can find anything from old newsletters to costumes. And even a Barbie of Rosie O'Donnell. There's aisles filled with dozens of boxes telling stories of the past.
You know, I do think queer history gets kind of boiled down to Stonewall, AIDS, gay marriage, and like that's it. And there's no conversation about how rich the history is before Stonewall, and there's no conversation about kind of positive moments.
Program coordinator Jen Dentel started as a volunteer 8 years ago and was quickly enchanted by the life of a Chicago drag queen, Miss Tilly.
Look at Miss Tilly, right? I mean, she's got the cat eye, there's fringe, there's gloves, there's so much of the beehive. She was a drag queen 40s. She passed, I believe, in 2005. Her biggest performances were in the 60s and 70s.
Now Miss Tilly's story, among others, is coming to life in a podcast series called Unboxing Queer History.
It's so exciting to see yourself reflected back at you in history. And I mean, I feel that particularly with the Amigas Latinas collection, which was a group that gathered monthly in the late 90s through the early aughts to just be Latina and be queer together and talk about it and bring in their families.
One thing that they were really excited about was the softball team. Here are some of the actual, hats and uniforms, and just imagine the kind of pride wearing something that has both of these identities.
Audio producer Ariel Mejia pitched the idea to Gerber Hart, and with the help of a grant, it grew into an 8-episode series, each episode diving into the work and lives of activists, performers, and organizations like Transgenesis.
This is an actual journal, and this is a collection that we have many copies of. And yeah, they interviewed the wonderful Lorraine Shade Baskerville. Started here in Chicago. It started here in Chicago up in Edgewater in 1995.
This is her. So cute.
Podcast creators say the series gives LGBTQ trailblazers a voice to unpack their experiences.
The people that we interviewed talking to us about their history and that we were even interested in it was a point of so much emotion for these elders that we talked to. It was incredible.
Film seized in police raid.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. 1991.
91, they were seizing films.
The group shares discovering their queer lineage has empowered them and hopes listeners feel the same.
Okay, 2000, which when we're like, oh, that wasn't that long ago.
22 years. 22 years.
Think about your photos of, you and your friends having fun at a bar. Think about the brochures from the organization you're starting. Your shirts, your hats, these are things that are so important and so valuable, and I hope people realize that just existing is important.
Miss Tilly. Hope they laugh. I think we've found ways to, bring joy and laughter to the fold, because queer history is a lot of fun. It doesn't only have to be kind of the heartbreak we've had to endure.
Silky gloves.
So I hope they're curious and happy. I hope it feels like a celebration.
I was about to say, curvy girl.
I know. Yeah.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Joanna Hernandez.
The Gerber Hart Library and Archives has been preserving queer items and collections since 1981. Head over to our website to learn how you can listen to the podcast. And we're back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
And that's our show for this Monday night, abbreviated to bring you the River Tour with Jeffrey Bayer. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing, and you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And please join us tomorrow night live at 7, one-on-one with the latest candidate to enter the race for Chicago Mayor, Roderick Sawyer, and efforts to address mental health challenges for Chicago's youth. And now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a great evening.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm pleased to give back to the community through numerous charitable initiatives.
The story of the Chicago River is really the story of Chicago. And to truly learn that story, channel your inner tourist.
All right, everybody, here we go. Do I have to wear one of those? I do? All right. You're gonna push me? Uh-huh. Full service. It's an age-old tradition. Rapids in the Chicago River? There's our next ride.
Next on WTTW.
On American Experience.